live. That's Evan's stream, yeah? Just turn on. Oh, great. Yeah. Absolutely. This is NM Evan Rabin, who does lectures. And, yeah, looks like he's going to be doing one on the Queen's Gambit. So let's rate them. Hopefully you guys enjoy.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Evan. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, a bunch of people are entering. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and do a fun Queen's Gambit lesson today. Harry, welcome. Kaylon, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Peter, welcome. Welcome. We'll get started in just a second here. Everyone is getting in. Yeah, so I thought we would do a little bit of a theme lesson on the Queen's Gambit today. I'm sure many of you on the Queen's Gambit today. Many of you on the Queen's Gambit. Yeah. Yeah. So, has anyone watched the film Queen's Gambit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, if you look at our blog, actually, you'll see we wrote a blog post actually about it today. I did myself, and it actually kind of just inspired me to start studying the Queen's Gambit a little bit. Yeah, I thought it was, and you could actually go ahead and see the blog post itself. Peter, do you think you could quickly go on my website and get the direct link to the blog post? It should be pretty easy to find.
I got you. That sounds.
Thank you. Yeah, that way people could see it afterwards. Yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool. So, but I'm not actually going to talk about games from the series. But I thought it was a good excuse for us to. Well, more people are trickling in. Okay, great. I thought it was just a good excuse to talk about the Queen's Gambit itself. By the way, raise your hand if you've ever played the Queen's Gambit. Okay, a couple of you. What was sort of your experience, with the Queen's Gambit, in doing so?
I like it. I feel like it's a strong opening that a lot of players online, I feel like, don't really know how to play.
Yeah, it's definitely true. The Queen's Gambit, for sure, is it's and I actually wrote about this in my blog post today. It's the type of opening that you'll see a lot at kind of top level games, and you'll see it definitely in weaker games as well, but a little bit less so. Okay, so the Queen's Gambit, D4, D5, C4. That's how it starts. So black has three main options here: the declined, the accepted, and the Slav. So I, by the way, don't do any of this. I personally play knight f6 against d4. That's a little bit of a side note. Those basically lead into Indian systems, and part of the reason you actually do that is you sort of want to avoid the Queen's Gambit itself. So let me ask you guys a question. What is sort of the general, if you had to sort of summarize the idea of the Queen's Gambit in like in a line or two, what do you think is like the whole point of the Queen's Gambit even?
Fast
The
development.
sacrifice of a pawn to gain positional advantage or quicker development.
So, Kalen, why do you think that the Queen's Gambit will try to give you a positional advantage by playing c4?
Because if they take, then you have full control of the center by pushing e4.
Okay, very good. Right, so that's the idea that I was trying to get at. Right, you're trying to get more center control by trying to get him to capture a pawn that's not in the center. So the Queen's Gambit accepted is something a little bit different. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And that's actually speaking of Queen's Gambit, one of the most, highly known women players, Irina Krush, who just won the U.S. Women's Championship a few weeks ago, is actually a big proponent of the Queen's Gambit accepted. I know she's been playing that for many, many years. But now we're going to look at this game that was played in the Queen's Gambit declined. And this was, as you could see, from Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov in their World Championship match back in 2000, in 1986. So knight c3, bishop e7. Bishop e7 is an interesting move. Knight f6 is also a possibility. And I do actually tell students in general that you want to develop your knights before your bishops, right? Because your knights almost always want to go to f6 and c6. Your white knights want to go to c3 and f3. But of course, in queen pawn openings, it's actually a little bit different. Why? Because in most cases, in queen pawn openings, you actually don't want to block your c pawn. Right, so for instance, if black were to play knight c6 right here, which, by the way, is a very common mistake that I see with adults and kids, that are, let's say, under maybe 1700, is they do just sort of go with the flow and, develop their pieces, play knight c6, knight f6, but the whole idea is you're never going to be able to certainly move your c pawn, right? So white will just play a move like knight f3, just a simple developing move, and black is going to struggle to really get any counterplay. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about that so far? Okay, so we're gonna move forward. So one thing that is important to consider is okay, right? Don't block the c pawn. So takes, bishop f4. You could tell that white is playing actually a little bit like a London system here. But unlike the London system, the bishop goes to d3. Typically in the London system, the bishop would go to e2. But does anyone know why in the London system you would sometimes play bishop e2 rather than bishop d3?
Is it to avoid the pinning on your f3 knight?
Not so much. I mean, in some cases it does as well, but I wouldn't say that's certainly the primary reason. I'll give you a hint. In this particular position, it's not something you would have to worry about, which is why bishop d3 is the better move here. So the reason in the London system that you would often play bishop e2 rather than d3 is to prevent the idea of like d6 and e5 and e4 creating a fork, right? So, right, for instance, right, like d4, knight f6, right, some of these lines in the London system, it actually makes a little bit like, so for instance, yeah, right, we might have something like this, takes, like d6, right? You might play bishop e2 over bishop d3, because in some lines you want to be concerned about like knight c6, right, and e5 and e4, right? So that's why in the London system, okay, the bishop often belongs on e2 rather than d3, right? But in this case, things are obviously a little bit different, right? And in this position, yeah, right, it makes, since the pawn is already on d5, it actually makes a lot more sense to play bishop d3 where it's on this super long diagonal, right? It has a lot more potential than when the bishop is on e2.
Evan, can you talk a little bit about pros and cons of White taking the pawn on b5 versus, say, advancing the c pawn to c5, or even just leaving it there?
Yeah, so back in this position?
Yes.
Sure. So good question. C takes d5 is an interesting move, and in fact, I am glad you brought this up. It's probably something I should have commented on more, actually, a little bit. C takes d5, e takes d5 is a very interesting positional dynamic, actually, right? On the one hand, it might not be so good because now, okay, this black bishop has more freedom, right? So I was actually telling a student about an hour ago that you want to always look at every single capture and check, but you don't necessarily want to do them unless they're actually going to help you, right? So which leads to, wait a minute, if the bishop is, now open for black, why would someone like Gary Kasparov, former world champion, make a move like that? Well, I think there's a couple ideas. One, right, we need to look at this a little bit more deeply. And the truth is, this bishop on c8 still really doesn't even have a lot of possibilities, right? Like bishop d7, of course, pawn hangs. Bishop e6, you're looking at a pawn. And the idea is if the bishop comes out too soon, white will be able to take advantage of that. So, for instance, if white plays knight f3 and black says, okay, I'm going to play bishop f5, what do you think white would do here? Anyone? Thoughts? How could you take advantage of the bishop coming out so soon?
Threaten with the knight.
Like knight h4? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Right. Well, then, unfortunately, the knight hangs.
Mm-hmm.
So, one question that you always want to ask yourself, and this is something I actually got from Grandmaster Alex Lenderman, a good friend, also, by the way, a proponent of the Queen's Gambit, is, right, in addition to why did my opponent make his move, and if he had another move, what would it be? What changed about the position? Right, so now that the bishop went to f5, what actually changed about the position?
He lost protection on the b7 pawn. So queen c3 is a double attack to the d5 pawn.
Queen b3. Exactly. Right, queen b3, very strong. Right, and black actually is already in very big trouble. Right, double attack, and white's winning a pawn, and right, things aren't so good here. So, anyway, right, the idea is, yeah, okay, black could play c6, but then, okay, maybe white has, a little bit of a lead in development. So maybe that's why, okay, c takes d5 makes a little bit of positional sense. Other thing that I think is probably worthwhile noting, right? So what's the alternative, right? The alternative is, okay, just develop knight f3. But okay, black, develops. Sooner or later, d takes c4 will actually be a threat. So I feel like sooner or later, he probably will have to make this trade anyhow. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. Good question there. So, okay, so let's continue. Bishop d3, c5. So black, of course, now is playing like a Tarrasch, right? Where he is likely sooner or later going to get an isolated d pawn, right? So this pawn on d5 now is isolated, right? Which means that, okay, it's a little bit weak, right? Which is a common, type of idea here. And actually, as you're going to see soon in the Queen's Gambit Accepted that I want to talk about after, white actually often gets an isolated queen pawn. So, isolated queen pawns are good and bad. What's the good thing about an isolated queen pawn? So for one, just for those of you that might not know, right, an isolated pawn is a pawn that doesn't have a pawn on either side of it. Right, so if you look at all of White's pawns, right, they all have neighbors. Pawn on d5, right, no c pawn, no e pawn. So only black pawns could defend against it. I mean, only black pieces could defend against it, right, not pawns. But okay, right, what's good about it, though? Peter?
Well, obviously it gives you a lot of kind of dynamic chances based on the fact that it opens certain files for your rooks and allows your pieces to be placed in some pretty nice squares that if you have kind of a more normal pawn structure, they're not necessarily available. Like in the Tarrasch, you get, you know, very dynamic positions, and if you like that, you don't really mind the weakness. You know, it can be nice to play.
Yeah. I mean, and anyone else have additional ideas? What's good about the D pawn?
In theory, it has the queen behind it to support it in its advance if the queen stays in its original position. Like, you want to have a piece behind the pawns that you push, right? Especially if they're isolated.
Interesting. I never actually thought about that. I wouldn't necessarily say so, right? Because, I mean, like, if anything, you would only want to play d4 to trade the pawn because it's a weak pawn, right? Meaning it's not like it. I wouldn't say it's something that is, that really makes an advantage, right? And it is true. Like sometimes you would leave your queen on d8, so you could play d4 and exchange the pawn off the board, right? But I wouldn't say that's like necessarily your, advantage behind it. So anyway, the main answer that I was trying to actually get is it controls a lot of very critical squares in the center. So when you have an isolated queen pawn, your main type of plan is really trying to control the c4 and e4 squares, right? You often, right, not right now, of course, right? But sooner or later, right, you might try to play like rook e8, knight e4, right? Control those squares, right? So that's the good thing, actually, about an isolated pawn. Now, of course, the bad thing about an isolated pawn is what we already pretty much said, right? It's weak. It doesn't have any friends. The last thing you do actually want is keep your queen on d8, keep your knight on f6, right? So like for instance, I was looking at a game with a beginner student yesterday, right? And his opponent was attacking his b pawn, right? And rather than play bishop b6 and just block the pawn, he decided to play rook b8, putting his rook behind the pawn. And, the last thing he wanted to do is what he did, right? Which is, have a heavy rook, just sitting behind the pawn. So, right, so white is going to start trying to blockade and ultimately try to win the pawn. Okay, so h3, bishop takes f3. So interesting move, right? Bishop takes f3. In a way, it goes against principles, right? What's sort of the natural move for black to play here?
Bishop h5.
Right? Yeah. Right. Frankly, that's what I would teach like a beginner here. Right? Probably. Right? Because okay, you have a pin and you want to keep the pin, right? And Philippe, actually asked us a couple weeks ago if we could do a lesson on pins and when you could keep pins and when you shouldn't keep pins, right? And it's tricky, like why shouldn't he play bishop g5? Well, I'm guessing here, but I think okay, maybe White will create his own pin, play bishop g5, right? And then right, he has a threat, right? Bishop takes f6, remove the guard. Queen takes f6, knight d5. And then he'll just retreat his bishop to e2. Right? So I think it's a time like this where you really need to, take, step away actually a little bit from these, basic principles and really think about what's happening, at the board. Oops, I accidentally clicked something here. This is the list that we're looking at, by the way. Certainly not going over all of the games from this list, but okay. So back here, bishop takes f3, and queen takes f3. Okay, d4. So, common idea, right? You want to exchange that isolated pawn off the board. Knight e4. But here, right, it's pretty clear that Kasparov has the advantage for one main reason. What is that one main reason that white should have an advantage here? Peter.
The bishops.
Two bishops. Right, also has a little bit of a advantage, I would say, in development, but okay, more so because of the two bishops. Okay, so let's see how he takes advantage of that. Knight g3, right? Interesting sort of patient move, right? The obvious move here, would be like a3, protect the pawn. But, of course, right, you always need to look at, sort of the big picture. And knight g3 was actually, a pretty interesting move, right? Going to f5, right? Going for an attack, building an initiative, and, doing very well. So d takes e3, f takes e3, right? Another interesting move, right? Type of move I would never make in the past, right? F takes e3, right? In a way, it's not natural. You're creating yourself an isolated pawn. But the idea is, Peter Rooney is asking me game 8. It could be game 8. All right. Oh, actually, yes, it is game 8 because it says round 8 up there. Yes, good job. All right. Awesome. Right, so F takes e3. Makes sense, right? You're building more pressure, opening up more lines, opening up the F file, and activating your rook. Okay. So F takes e3. By the way, I think someone might have like a TV on or something in the background, so if you could mute yourself, that would be good. Unless it's my computer, but no, I don't have anything else on. Okay. F takes e3, queen takes a2, knight f5. Right, so now, of course, the g pawn is a target as well. Bishop h6, building the attack. Queen h5. Queen g4. And of course, I could be talking about this game, the whole lecture, of course, but my main focus is actually to talk about the opening. So as you can see here, white is, still building up an attack. Queen g5. So my good friend, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, Bruce Alberston, once had this idea about the blueprint checkmate. He basically said, right, sometimes when black has these sort of weak squares around his king, it actually makes sense to sort of think about, well, if I could pick up a piece and put it anywhere on the board, where would it be? Right? And of course, if you could pick up the queen and put it anywhere on the board, well, queen g7, checkmate. And, right, it's a little bit strange that white could just say, okay, I'm going to come to g5 with the intent on getting there. But actually, his position is kind of so much better that you sort of could do things that are, at least similar to that. So queen takes b2, and now he makes king h1. Right, a little bit of an interesting move. Right, main idea is if queen h6 immediately, well, he's going to play rook g2, rook takes g2 check. Right, and it's actually going to be checkmate. Right, king h1, king g1 and queen g2 mate, right? Winning. So moving backwards to this position, right? He plays this preemptive king h1 move, king h8, right? And now he could actually, well, he played knight d4, disconnecting the black knight from the queen, right? So now queen takes e5 is a threat. Rook takes d4, queen takes e5, and all of a sudden white is just basically totally winning, and he resigned. So black has basically one move or two moves to not lose material, right? Rook b4 and rook d2, right? And at first glance, it looks like, you know, maybe black is okay. Everything is protected. But what does white do here? Mr. Peter.
You have rook takes f7 check, because after queen takes queen, you have rook takes f8 check. And, oh wait, no, it's not mate.
You gotta be careful. You gotta be careful.
I would have played that in like 2 seconds in a game thinking mate.
Right, and that's why it's important to do blunder checks.
But he has king h6 at the end. Oh. I feel
Right.
silly.
Just to show everyone, right? Rook takes f7, queen takes e5, rook takes, king g7, and I think white could actually resign. So what would white do here? Anyone?
Then you take the f7 pawn, rook takes, and then you have the two pawns lined up on the 7th rank.
So say that one more time. You should take the f7 pawn here.
So queen takes queen, rook takes queen, fine. Then rook takes f7.
Well, one thing, hold on, to stop you for a second, right? You're down a pawn here.
Right, but then you're gonna get it back up. You're gonna get it back.
How?
Right, because you have those two. Oh no, you won't. Jesus.
Right, a5. Maybe white could get a draw, but doubtfully. Right, you gotta be careful. Right, so honestly, I was looking at this game earlier, and at first I actually was like, wait a minute, why did he resign? But then I was like, oh, of course. It's actually just a relatively simple move.
What happens with rook f2?
So
rook f1 to f2.
Well, if rook 1 to f2, well, then he plays queen takes e5. That's a problem.
All right, I give up.
What about the queen to b7? Could that work? Queen to b7?
Queen.
Up 2 to
queen to e7?
Yes. E7.
That is the correct move.
Okay.
Right? So let's go back, guys, to a lesson that we did, I believe, the first class, for those of you that were there, which, you know, was about thought process. Right? Your opponent makes a move. Okay? The first thing you're always going to do is you're going to write it down. Okay? Second thing you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself, okay, why did he make that move? Well, a couple of reasons. Rook was in danger beforehand. He also has Okay, it's weird. It says I was signed out, but I obviously wasn't because I'm here. Okay. Right, rook d2, right? The other obviously big thing is queen takes e5, right? Is a threat. You had a nice discovery that okay, clearly you need to deal with. Right? So now let's come up with candidate moves. Right? One thing is sort of the, create a typical idea, rook takes f7, build a discovery of your own. But of course, the king has a square to run to on 8-6, and okay, white is going to be losing. Right? Second thing you need to think about is the evaluation of the position. Right? Well, if you evaluate the position, well, black is up a pawn right now. Black is up 2 pawns right now. But so you do need to do something, relatively quickly, to move forward, right? Because if you don't do something relatively quickly, okay, you're going to be down in material. So the first move that I'm really thinking about is something like Queen E7, right? A lot of threats. I'm attacking the rook. Right, of course you can't play rook takes g2, right? Because the rook is hanging. And here, well, black actually is just completely losing. Right? Because I also wrote a blog post recently about the pecking order of rooks. Where do rooks love to be? The 7th rank. And pretty much, right, if you look at white's rooks, there's just so much more strong, than black's rooks. Right? Does anyone see any potential ideas for black to defend here?
What happens with rook d8?
Which rook? The D rook?
Sorry, rook 2 d8. Yeah.
Right, rook 2 d8. Well, I think in this position, white actually just takes on f7.
Yeah.
Right, and by the way, you do have to calculate a little bit here, just to make sure he doesn't have any like perpetuals or anything. But of course, the king is just very safe. Right, and now you're actually threatening. I mean, too many things. Rook takes 8-7 check, queen takes d8, and even like queen f6 and queen g7 mate. Right, so yeah, I thought that was definitely an interesting lesson. Okay. So let's go back and we're gonna talk now about the Queen's Gambit accepted. So a couple things to consider here. We're actually going to look at another Kasparov game. And this was against Boris Golko. Some of you might know him. He's a top Israeli and then U.S. player. He actually currently lives in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. With some mutual friends. And, okay, Queen's Gambit accepted. So, D takes C4. Couple things to note, right? One, what we talked about before, which is that your idea is you're sort of doing a decoy from the center, right? And trying to, build in the center. When meanwhile, obviously white is going to try to capture back his pawn and, have this big center, but black will also sometimes have development and other advantages in exchange for that. One thing that is definitely important to note is the fact that the Queen's Gambit's name by itself is like almost a little bit of a misnomer, right? Because it's not really a gambit, right? Like the King's Gambit, for instance, right, which in some slight ways is like somewhat similar, is actually a gambit, right? If black wants to hold on to his pawn, well, he is going to hold on to his pawn. So it's like does Golko have a plus score versus Kasparov? I did hear that once, Peter. I don't want to like 100% say that's true without knowing 100% the facts, but I think I did hear that once. Yeah, he is like one of the few like grandmasters who has or anyone for that matter who has a positive score. Okay. D takes C4. Okay, so E3, common idea. So black in this position plays knight F6. Now, one thing that is important to consider, what happens if black tries to be greedy and plays B5 and holds on to the pawn? Does anyone have a suggestion for white?
I think it's you can attack the defender of that pawn.
So what do you think?
I think with the knight, if I remember correctly. So knight to C3.
So let me say a few things, right, before I actually give you the answer. Right? One thing, right, don't do openings by memory. Right? Have the ideas, yes, remember certain ideas, but at the same time, right, you're thinking at the board. Right? So forget about theory, right, whether you know this opening or not. Well, I see this as a mini pawn chain, right? This B pawn and this C pawn. So where should you attack a pawn chain? The front or the back?
The back.
Right? You're always attacking the root of the pawn chain. So, yes, one idea is knight c3, right, which you were saying. But now, the problem is, okay, I think black protects it.
Yeah.
Right? A6. You
A6.
know, now if you play like A4, well, okay, B4. Right? Things aren't so clear. Knight E4, bishop E6. Right? And, not so easy to win back the pawn. Right? So what's a better way to attack the root of the pawn chain?
A6 directly.
A4 directly.
A5, sorry. What am I talking about? A4.
Right? So now, of course, if A6, white will play A takes B5, and you can't capture back because of the pin. And if C6, what is white going to do? Peter?
You just push D5?
Well, if D5, then I think black plays queen takes D5, maybe. Right, queen takes, pawn, pawn. Actually, this is rather complicated, actually. But yeah, I think black should be pretty okay here. Right, it's a very strong center.
Then you just take the pawn and open the file for the rook.
What, in this position?
Uh-huh.
What, rook takes A7?
No. Just take the pawn, open the file.
Bishop takes E4?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I'm trying.
No, before the.
Oh.
Yeah, instead of pushing D5.
Oh, A takes B5 in this position.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but then black actually has this important intermezzo in between move and then takes on B5. Yeah, Peter.
Perhaps in the original position, after A4, C6, just play knight C3, and you're fine. Because he's wasting all his moves,
Yeah, but again, right, you can't assume that. Queen A5.
Okay, bishop D2.
Bishop D2 and B4, and this is rather complicated. Right, knight E4, bishop A6.
If anybody's interested, I put Evan's post that he mentioned on the pecking order of rooks in the chat if you want to take a look at that.
Thank you, Peter. Right, this is rather complicated. So anyway, white actually has something substantially better. White actually has a winning idea. So one thing that you always want to consider in chess are actually two types of moves, right? You don't always want to make them, of course, but you always want to consider checks and captures, right? There are two types of moves that you can never forget, right? Checks and captures, right? So, of course, white has two possible captures in this position. Bishop takes c4, of course, right? You might think about it for like, a split second, but okay, hangs a piece, right? The only other reasonable one is what? What's the only other capture in the position?
Yeah, so pawn takes pawn,
Yep.
and then you have queen f3 attacking the rook, and it's undefendable.
Now that's where we're talking. Right? Queen f3. Right? So, I want we'll get back to that position, in a second actually. But, back here, this idea, right, if you've never seen it before, does actually require thinking outside the box a little bit. Right? Because in this position, like, in a way, it doesn't make sense. Black has these doubled pawns. This knight on b8 can't really develop. Right? So, in a way, this move actually is somewhat anti-positional. Right? Because you're fixing his pawns. Right? It doesn't make sense. Right? For instance, if the knight was, like, already on f3, then yeah, right, this would be a horrible exchange for white. But of course, with the knight not already on f3 and white playing queen f3, black is actually just losing. Right? His best idea actually is to play knight c6 so that after queen takes c6, bishop d7, you don't win the rook, but of course white is just up a piece, right, and is winning. So, right, that's the idea. Right, if c6, a takes, c takes, queen f3, and kind of a pretty common trap, actually, that white could play. Okay, so let's go back to the game. Most players, of course.
Can I ask you a question before you go forward here, Evan?
Yeah, please.
So one thing that I think about sometimes, it's if I should lock in my bishop or not. And obviously, without thinking about it too much, why would you ever lock in your bishop? What's the upside? But for example, I would have played e4, right? So I can control the center, and my black square bishop is free to go out of the pawn chain. Obviously, Kasparov is much smarter than I am, so I'm sure it's not necessarily a bad idea to do e3. But why is that? It just looks quite inferior to me.
Sure. So yeah, there's a lot of good points that you raised there. For one, right, don't assume, Kasparov, necessarily made a better move. I mean, for one, so actually, by the way, e3, e4, and knight f3, which Peter is suggesting to me in private chat. By the way, Peter, going forward, say that in the public chat. All that stuff is good for people to see.
I made a typo, sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But I'm saying it's it's a conversation. It's good. Right. Right. So yeah, knight f3 followed by e3 is actually another common theoretical move. Right. So all three are actually totally theoretical. Which one is best out of those three? I could definitely not give you an answer. What I actually thought you were going to ask at first when you were saying that, is why not play bishop f4 first, and then play e3. But the problem with that is black gets some quick counterplay actually with c5, and you just don't have time for that. Right? So in a perfect world, yes, you would actually play bishop f4 and then e3, bishop takes e4, and your bishop is outside of the pawn chain. Of course, black gets moves. So that's what I thought you were going to say at first. right? But the idea is after e4, which again is a very theoretical line, basically, it's actually like more theoretical. And the idea, so actually, Peter Rudy here, plays the Grunfeld, and you're actually going to get a lot of like basically similar lines where white has like a big center, and in exchange for that, black will have some good counterplay. So for instance, like knight f6 here, right? White actually has to play knight c3 to protect the pawn, and now I think black could play. What's the most theoretical move here? I think like e6, bishop takes c4, like bishop b4, and it's a little bit unclear. White does have the center, but black has a lot of very quick, counterplay. So generally speaking, e3 is a little bit of a quieter option. Okay, so knight f6, so bishop takes c4, e6, knight f3, c5. All right, so in this position, e4 is a little bit of a crazy line that I haven't actually studied much. Right, the normal, most common line is this, and just like before in the Queen's Gambit decline game that we were just looking at, well, it's kind of the opposite. White has this isolated pawn, and in exchange for white having, the somewhat weak isolated pawn, he has good pressure on e5 and c5. And in this case, white also has another advantage, which is space, right? This black bishop on c8 is, okay, very limited, right, on c8. So anyway, in this game, Kasparov decided to play e4, which is kind of an interesting gambit line, actually. Which by itself, for those of you that might not know, a gambit is basically when you sacrifice a pawn, usually in order to gain attack, or in sometimes just building your development, right, and getting more pieces out than your opponent. I think it's important to note that even at the top level, right? Gambits do exist. This is called the Russian Gambit. Honestly, I didn't know that until today. But I guess the idea, if knight takes e4, what do you think white would do? What's sort of like the most logical move?
Rook e8 with a tempo on the knight.
Well, rook e1, yeah.
A1, sorry, yeah.
Right, so rook e1, right, and it makes sense, right? The last thing you want to do, by the way, play like knight c3, right? You're down a pawn, you don't want to trade, right? And it's, really important to keep up the momentum. Rook e1. Black has an interesting idea of like knight d6, right, attacking the bishop. But I think, okay, white will play bishop d3, takes, and I'm not saying white is winning, but it's very, very clear that Garry Kasparov has lots of, compensation here, for the pawn. So black plays b5 instead, bishop d3, bishop b7, right? So this is a little bit of an interesting case. White has a very strong center, a d4 and e4, but in exchange for that, black has, some strong, initiative, with his bishop and knight. Okay, so bishop g5, creating a pin. C takes d4. Right. One thing that is important to consider, right? Why not e5? Looks like it might be winning a piece.
But then h6.
And bishop h4.
and then G5.
That's it.
Then your kind of pawns on the king side are a bit screwed, but
right. But at the same time, right, look at this beautiful fiend shadowed bishop, right? And here's the thing. I was actually looking at a similar game yesterday, actually, at this fundraiser lesson that I was doing. And I kind of asked a little bit of a trick question. It was a position like somewhat like this, right? And I said, "Oh, who has the safer king?" Right? And everyone said, "Oh, white has a safer king." Right? Because his king is castle, black king is, in the middle of the open. But the truth is, it's not so clear. The white, even though white's king is castled, well, look at this bishop coming, right? Look at the G pawn coming, right? So, like for instance, if E takes F6, takes on H4, well, I think black is actually doing very well. The rook's going to come to this, open file or semi-open file on the G file, and that king on G1, right? Even though it's castled, doesn't mean it's exactly safe. So because of that, white does not play e5 and plays knight takes d4. Now, of course, if queen takes d4, white has this discovered check, right? Bishop b5 check, has to get out of check, and queen takes queen, winning. So he obviously sees that and continues with his development. Knight bd7. So black has a lot of play on all of these dark squares. Okay, so knight d7, knight c3, continuing his development. Knight e5, knight takes b5. Right, very interesting. Sacrificing material. I can't say anything for sure, but I think Kasparov realized that he did not have really a successful opening here. And that's okay. When you have, a not so successful opening, and maybe your position is even a little bit worse, you should go for some complications. Right? Black now, right, has this quick expansion on the queen side. Black has this beautiful knight on e5. And black has a really nice bishop on b7, right? Fiend shadowed, I think doing very well. So white decided that, okay, he's going to, mix things up, right? Because, for instance, right, the natural move, like, bishop e2, okay, runs into b4. Knight a4, bishop takes e4. So, okay, he decided, for better or for worse, to mix things up. And black plays an important move. Knight takes d3, right? One, very common mistake if students think, oh, he took me, I got to take back, right? Or so forth. But of course, right, first, since you're winning material, it makes sense to do a trade first. Rook fd1, bishop e7, queen takes b5 check, queen d7. Bishop e7 also is an important move to, I think, learn about, right? Because a lot of students, would spend time, protecting the pawn, right? Like b5, b4, right? The truth is, right, you need to think bigger picture. Now the king is still in the center, and white could play something like queen b5 check was my initial reaction. I think, okay, queen d7 and is going to trade. But I think, okay, no, white might play, actually something like e5, right? Queen d5, queen g3. And this is rather complicated. Right, king is still in the center, right? Not so easy, right? So sometimes, and I was actually watching a streamer today, I forget, someone, where it basically said, like, yes, sometimes you should be giving back, not all, but, some material. So that's what he did, right? And now black is relatively safe. Knight takes g7, king f8, h5. Right now the knight on g7 was trapped, right? And sometimes you do need to think, a little bit outside the box, right? King takes g7, right? It goes against principles in a way. You're going into, potential discoveries and forcing the king, to come up to f6, right? And if you didn't really calculate at all there, you might not even consider this line, because the king has to go towards the center. But of course, black's king is actually relatively okay. Yes, not that safe. But okay, two bishops is two bishops. Rook d4, bishop d6, king g6. As Peter says, right? Very important idea. You need at least 3 pieces to make an attack, right? And these bishops do a great job of controlling all of these critical squares. Bishop c7, and black actually, Kasparov resigned. Right, because all the squares are controlled. Black has things like bishop e5, or simple things like rook ag8 and king h7, and winning. Any thoughts, questions, ideas? As I set up an endgame position for our remaining couple minutes.
What was the mistake that was made there? Was there one, or was it really just positionally? Kasparov just had a worse position.
It's a good question. I think so. Bishop takes e4, e6, knight f3, c5. Right, this is all normal. A6, e4. I think maybe in this position, I think maybe again, I don't know enough theory to, truly answer one way or the other. E4 is definitely relatively rare. I don't see it a lot. I think maybe he was experimenting a little bit, in this game. So I think that, might be, one thing. And I think the second thing, might be that, okay, in this position, maybe c takes d4 was a little bit risky. Maybe he should play like bishop e7, break the pin. Definitely a little bit more solid.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, let's create this analysis board here real quick. And yeah, we're gonna talk. Some of you might know this, some of you, might not know this, or whatnot. But we're gonna talk about, and probably not gonna finish actually. Maybe we'll, start with this next week as well. But we're gonna talk about one of the most important rook and pawn endgames, which is the Lucena position. So in the Lucena position, right, first thing that you need to know is how to actually identify it. Well, you have a pawn on the 7th rank that wants to promote, but your king is in front of it. And the black king is about usually 2 files apart from, two files apart from your king. So, how does white try to win this game? Does anyone have any ideas?
Evan, sorry to interrupt. I think this is the one where you build a bridge.
Yep, exactly.
I think we did this one maybe last week, but I know there's some other. I missed the beginning. Some other folks on the line. I forgot it, to be honest. So I'm happy to watch it again.
Good. Yeah. No. I think we did actually, right? But yeah, they like these things are just like the type of thing that, like, you need to know it like, the back of your hand.
Good
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so since you're the one who remembered, which should white do first? Pop quiz.
No, I said I forgot. I know there was something about building. You need to get.
Okay, so forget about the whole plan. What should white do first?
Rook to d7, maybe?
So rook d7 check, king c8. It's going to be very hard for you to make progress.
Rook c1.
So rook c1 check is the first idea. You need to make sure that there's at least 2 files in between the 2 kings. Now what does white do? Does anyone remember the critical idea?
King d7.
So the problem is, right, there's going to be a lot of checks that you can't really avoid. So there's the critical idea, I'm going to say it because we're out of time, is bring your rook to the 4th rank. And the whole idea is now you're going to do exactly what's called building a bridge. Right, we get to here, you build a bridge, and black is just busted, right? He has to trade rooks, and you make a queen.
Why do you build a bridge on the 4th rank and not on the 5th, for example?
So the 5th rank in some cases does work as well, actually. But I think usually just like the king is a little bit closer. So actually, the truth is, in a lot of lines, the 5th rank works as well. But yeah, I mean, just the 4th rank is, I don't know, more typical. Okay, well, thank you, everyone,
Thank you
for
very
another
much.
great class. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Also, as a reminder to everyone, we kind of agreed that we weren't going to do a playing element. That said, if you do have any games kind of throughout the week that you find somewhat interesting or instructive, more than happy to look at them. So actually, like for instance, our intermediate class that's in 15 minutes, we're actually starting out by going over a game that someone sent me throughout the week. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks, Evan.
And Monty, so great. By the way, everyone, Monty is one of my grandfather's best friends, who I've been around forever. So it's so great to have you. Really.
Yeah, that's embarrassing, but it's true. Nice meeting you. We'll talk soon.
Definitely.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, Evan.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone, just stick around. We will be back for next lesson at 8:15 p.m. Meanwhile, check out Puzzle. Yeah, we're gonna set up a nice puzzle for you guys to check out during the intermission. This one, of course, is black to play and win. You could let us know what your thoughts are here. All right, hello everyone. We are about to get started with the next class. Welcome everybody. Hello everyone.
Hello.
How's everything?
Hello,
Okay.
Hello.
So people are trickling in a little bit. So while we do that, I figured we would go ahead and do this puzzle, which just is a little bit of a warm up. So this is black to play and win. What are your thoughts? Black to play and win, Mr. Peter Wheel.
How many moves?
As
Is that
many
for us
moves
to
as
find
you
out?
need.
What up?
Is that for us to find out?
And as many moves as you need.
Excuse me, Evan, so this is a puzzle now? It's black to play?
Yes, black to play and win.
Knight f3 check.
Okay,
I
and
didn't
so
calculate.
what happens after G takes F3?
Rook DGA check.
Right, or just Rook G8 check. Yep. Okay, and King H1.
Queen H3.
No, better.
Actually, I can find the move that's better than that. It's mate. It's forced. Right. So it's actually, I actually see it now. Knight F3, G takes F3, Rook G8 check, Queen takes H2, and then Rook H4 checkmate. Right, Evan? Or Mr. Russian Roulette Man?
Okay.
They're both mating, but yeah.
No, good teamwork. Good teamwork, guys.
No, it's forcing moves matter. Like think of it. If
Okay,
king's
okay,
in danger,
okay,
you
okay.
need forcing moves.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Jim, nice job, but let me talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Russian Roulette, Evan.
Okay, please stop that. Thank you. All right.
What's going on?
Knight F3 check. G takes, or Queen takes. Right. So yeah, if G takes F3, all right. Yes, that would be a winning solution. And okay, we moved on, but by accident, but okay, I don't even know how to get back there.
That one.
Here we
nice,
go.
Nice.
Okay, so right, Knight F3 check. Right, everything is with force. Right, and then okay, he was winning here. Right, because if G takes F3, right, as he correctly said, right, Rook G8 check. Right, because Queen H3, actually, no, not the same, Peter. Right, Rook G1.
Well, I mean, you'll play his idea on the next move, I guess. But yeah, now you play Queen takes H2.
Okay, fair. Wait.
But you could do it a move earlier. Yeah, I know. I noted. I didn't see.
So anyway, yes, that is the correct idea. Okay, so right, simple lesson, right, about forcing moves, right, always important, right, forcing, better than otherwise.
Excuse me, Evan. It's not just a personal question; it's just a general question. Why aren't you happy with like what I'm saying? Because I'm just answering.
Okay, let's not talk about that. Okay, thank you. We're gonna move forward. So, thank you, Jim, for submitting a game the other day. And yeah, this is a game that he played against a strong grandmaster, Alexander Golden, I believe, in a simul. Correct, Jim?
Correct. It was in the Senior Open in 2019.
Oh, wonderful. And where was that?
In Chicago. It featured Alexander Yermolinsky, and then I'm drawing a blank. The former U.S. champion Joel Benjamin was there. Yeah, so this was the opening, night, kicking things off with a simul. So Grandmaster Golden won all the games except one. He beat me. But I had a draw with him, and I actually completely blundered the game away. And the guy next to me drew him, so he's the only. He didn't lose at all, but he had one draw, and I don't know, something like 5 or 6 victories.
Okay,
so
let's get into it.
Sure.
So I did have a chance to quickly pull it the other day. I thought it was pretty interesting actually. So before I get into it, right, a couple things to mention. For one, you mentioned Joel Benjamin. Some of you might know he actually just won the U.S. Senior Championship virtually like 2-3 weeks ago. Something like that. So, congrats to Joel.
Evan, who won was the U.S. Open along with the U.S. Senior Open held at the same time, but only virtually? Am I right or wrong?
The U.S. Open, I don't know if they even did no, I think maybe. I don't know 100%. But anyway, let's move on. Right, so, anyway. Okay, cool. So, anyway, in the game, you were black. So C4, right? The English, not really an opening. I've talked about it all in the class.
Evan, can you flip the board because we want to see it from Black's perspective?
No, it's okay. I mean, I usually have white on the bottom. Actually.
And you have to hide the notations.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so okay, so the English, right? Couple ideas about the English that are important to note. Last week we talked about the Catalan, thanks to Tim's game, and there are actually some similarities, between them, in the sense that you are going to typically be in shadow. You're going to have a bishop on a long diagonal, and you are often going to play for the critical d5 square. Okay, so e6, knight c3, knight f6, and so one thing that's worth noting here, if you're gonna play e6, right, totally fine. What do you play against d4, Jim?
What would I play against d4?
Yeah, what do you play against d4?
I usually play either e6 or I play d5 or e6, one of the two. I play the French or.
Okay, got it. So the only reason I asked that question, right? Of course, after c4 e6, right, you need to be totally comfortable if he does transition to d4. So actually, another American Grandmaster, Michael Rode, who actually subbed last week in our adult advanced class, right? He, for many years, has been playing knight f3 and the English c4, but really with the idea of converting into queen pawn opening. So all I'm saying is, yes, you do need to be comfortable with that. So for instance, one thing that I used to do that I'm almost like embarrassed to talk about is play c6 against the English, literally praying that my opponent wouldn't play d4 because I didn't know the Slav. And then they played d4 occasionally. I was like, oops, I'm in trouble. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Excuse me? So you're saying that you hope your opponent would play d4 to play the Slav defense?
Well, the opposite. I didn't know the Slav, really. And, okay, then I had my other, hospital lines. I used to play the, Schlechter, but, okay, that's a whole nother terrible story that I'm not going to get into. Whole idea is c4, e6. Okay, you got to be able to be comfortable with some of the queen pawn lines that could follow. Okay, so knight c3, knight f6.
Hide the notation, please.
e4. Okay, so black has two main possibilities here in the English. Or in this line of the English. One is this interesting d5 move, which I don't know very well. But like generally speaking, black is like relatively okay. The other line is what Jim did, which is actually the line that I play myself as black, which is c5. Yes, Peter.
I have a question. Isn't this not so good for white? Because since you're basically stopping d4 unless he does play d4, but that's not really in English fashion.
Right. So yeah, so d4 of course, yeah, right, no good, right? You just play knight c6 and get a big development.
Kind of forced to play d3 and have like a Botvinnik triangle, which from personal experience I don't find to be so good for white. I mean, play d3, g3, bishop g2, knight e2. Isn't that how you play this position as white? It's not so great.
Okay, so there are 3 main possibilities here. 1, d3, and yeah, you're right. Black just has, absolutely no problems. Decent game. Good.
And also, the thing about was the difference is the fact that black has not committed his e-pawn nor his d-pawn at all yet, so he still has the d5 break anytime he wants to.
I disagree. But, I'll explain why in a second, right? But, okay, so knight f3 is the line that he played in the game, which, yes, is one of the main theoretical ideas, right? You want to play knight f3 and d4, and you're basically playing it. It's actually likely going to transpose to like a Maroczy bind, right, type of idea in the Sicilian. The other thing that you need to note, right, is this e5 move, right? It looks like super, super, super strong. And it is kind of strong. Well, it's an interesting line, right? Black has to play knight g8.
Right.
Right, it looks really, really bad, actually. But the idea is, after knight f3, knight c6, black has a lot of counterplay, on the e-pawn and d-pawn. And now there's actually an interesting pawn sacrifice line, which I played many times as black. Knight takes d4, knight takes f4, bishop f4. And now black actually has a number of ideas. But the most theoretical idea here actually is to play f6.
F6.
And now, after knight b5, you have this sort of crazy idea of a6. And after takes, you play knight f7. And knight e7, knight c6. And basically, okay, this position is actually sort of around equal, but, black is okay, basically. Okay. Any questions about any of that?
Interesting.
All right, yeah, definitely interesting. Definitely dynamic. I've also played knight g6 before, but generally speaking, white has some pretty strong. I mean, okay, I think this is also like decent for black, but it's definitely kind of annoying. With all these dark squares, of course.
Yeah, and also knight d to b5 soon.
Right. Well, probably not, right? Because you're gonna play like a6. But yeah, like generally speaking, white does have, some decent compensation here. Okay. So moving forward, that was not played in the game, and frankly, I think it makes sort of sense for Golden, right? Especially in a simul, to not get into a wild line like that. Especially when, theory basically says that black is, not just up a pawn for nothing, but, okay, doing okay. So, d6, d4. Now, in this position, right, c takes d4, knight takes d4 would actually be a direct transition into a Sicilian, right, a Slovenian.
Or is it Maroczy bind?
Well, the Maroczy bind is actually against the dragon, an accelerated dragon, so similar type of setup, but not exactly the Maroczy bind. But I think that's what you have to do here, right? You can't let him have this big center, right? So this is what I actually think is your first mistake of the game, right? He plays d4, right? It's very important to take on d4. What were your thoughts in that position, Jim? I mean,
Yeah,
I know it's a little while ago, so you might not
it is, yeah. You know, my instinct was I wanted to castle early on, so sometimes you make these natural moves like get the bishop out, and then castle, but and I'm always reluctant. I'm always I'm sometimes uncertain as to when to break, the tension in the center, but I think, I can see that now that I look at the game again, that would have been the right move to make because he's starting to build this, big pawn center, and you needed to really, challenge him more. I guess another move to make here, perhaps. Let's see. No, that's not good either. I don't see any alternative.
Okay, so let me stop you for a second, right? And say, a couple related things, right? One, okay, it's a general. Okay, so first thing I think is very important. Not sure if you realize this or not, during the game, but the first thing you really need to do is you need to realize that you transition to the Sicilian. Would you say you've done that? Would you say you knew that during the game?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing, right? Transitions are important to note. Second thing, right? In the Sicilian, right? Almost always, right? When the white pawn comes to d4 in the center, you pretty much have to, immediately take, right? Almost without thought. Because otherwise, yes, he is going to play d4, expand, have a very good, important center.
You mean d5?
Yes, expand in the center with like something like d5. Right. The third thing to think about, right, is just everything comes back to thought process. Right. So when your opponent makes a move, okay, the first thing you do is you write it down. Okay, great, d4. Second thing you do is you kind of ask yourself, well, if he had another move, what is it going to be? Okay, well, I'm not actually sure, but, develop or d5, right? All these moves are kind of scary. Right, so naturally, yes. Okay, C takes d4. Peter, yeah, if you could, send me the PGN. Do you know how to do that? That's the easiest.
Like if you want to send in the PGN, Peter, you can just plug in the game if you haven't played it online. If you played it in person, just plug it into.
Or actually, what we could do here, it was from chess.com. Peter, private message other Peter your chess.com account, and then he could get the PGN from it.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. And then you could even copy and paste the PGN like right in the chat, and then I could upload it. Okay, cool. Teamwork. Okay, so back to game. I do have to go back to the score sheet for a second to find the move that was played. D6. Okay, so so D4, Bishop E7. Right. Bishop E2. Honestly, a little bit surprising. I would think that he would consider something like D5.
What about D takes C5?
Well, if D takes C5, probably just pawn takes C5, right? This doesn't exactly help your cause.
I mean, you could just play either bishop F4, G5, or E3, and offer a trade of queen on D1. Because if he takes, you just take with the rook. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, but where's White's advantage here?
I see what you're saying, Evan, now.
Right? So, right, one thing, that's very important to note, I was talking about this in a fundraiser lesson that I was doing yesterday, right? You don't want to be satisfied with an equal position with white, right? You actually, want to make sure that, okay, you have some advantage. Okay, so anyway, he played bishop e2. He just continued developing his pieces. I would probably take another opportunity now to take on d4. Okay, so queen c7, castles, bishop g5. So in this position, right, a6, I wasn't actually so sure about that move. Because, okay, you should still take here, right? Like knight takes d4, and then even then, right, you castle, right, and you're not so worried about like this knight db5 move, right, or anything like that, because your queen just runs back and you're going to kick it with a6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so h6, bishop h4. Honestly, again, I think you should take on d4.
Yeah, really.
h3.
But Evan, I have a question.
Sure.
Could we rewind before castles was made? Like after h6?
Here?
Yeah. Would g5 be possible?
Then you're just not going to really be able to castle.
Yeah, you're right.
Right, so unless you have... So, the rule of thumb sort of says, right, you don't want to play h6 and g5 against the bishop on g5 in general, unless there's like some sort of tactic, right, where you're like winning something. But yeah, white would just basically be much better.
Yeah, and also the bishop is on a better diagonal.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I mean, with my queen on that diagonal there, and that I would just be forcing the bishop back to a square I really don't want it on anyway. I think. Although I guess, well then I can't even capture it because you can just play h3 and pull the bishop back. So I didn't even contemplate that. I don't like making weakening moves unless like that, unless there's some attack that I sustained attack that I could see I could make. But I usually refrain from those, like a move like that.
Yeah, so one actually thing that actually is worth noting about this whole idea, the other reason that black often does actually play this whole g5 idea, right, is to play like knight h5 and try to, grab the bishop pair. But I guess the thing is, yeah, okay, like white will just expand in the center and maybe even take with the f pawn, right, to open up the F file and, okay, be doing very well. So, okay, so back here, bishop g3.
Yeah, I haven't just mentioned, I put the PGN in the chat, so.
Yep, I saw that. Thank you. Right, so in this position, Jim, why knight fd7?
All right, let's see.
Right, so I'm not. Yeah, sorry.
I think I was trying to make room for the other knight to come out, but I don't know. My thinking was at this point. I felt like my pieces are just getting cramped. I need to start. I'm kind of behind in development here, and of course, then what do? I move the same, the same piece. I don't know if my other knight is better posted on c6. It almost looks like that would be the case. I think I was probably honestly thinking of getting that bishop out, vacating the square to get my bishop out. But then, again, where is that bishop going to exactly go? It doesn't have, other than perhaps I was thinking, well, that wouldn't work either. Yeah, I just felt cramped at this point. I'm trying to uncramp my position.
Makes sense.
Maybe want to support your b5 break and play bishop b7. That would be a lot more active. Maybe even pawn and just.
So what would you move the b pawn then? You're thinking?
Well, I think you still have to take on d4.
Yeah.
And I was actually gonna say that. I was gonna be like, you know what? Since you didn't do it, you might as well make you wrong. Just take on e4 because if he takes with the knight, then you just play knight c6. You know.
Yes.
Maybe just play b5 right away and just sack the pawn and play if he takes with the pawn, just play
Wait, what right away? Oh, b5 right away.
Yeah, so if he plays c takes b5, don't.
I'm up a pawn for nothing.
I mean, that's how I play, but
I know how you play, but I'm up a pawn for nothing. Thank you very much. Okay.
So now I'm wondering if I ever played C captures d5 in this game. I think maybe eventually I did, but I can't remember
Okay,
now.
but in all seriousness, right? Okay, back to this position, right? Knight fd7, right? Just kind of looks passive to me. So one thing that is important to note, and I've said this, like on multiple occasions today, actually, to different students, which is this really important idea that I really don't care who you're playing, right? You want to always predict your opponent is 50 points higher rated than you, right? You're giving them a little bit of respect, but not, hey, Mr. Golden, you're a grandmaster, right? I personally I've yet to beat my first grandmaster. I have about like 13 draws against grandmasters. None of those draws, I would say, it was just like an equal game until the end, to be honest. Right? I had one game against Michael Rode, I think 2 years ago, where, it was in the, that's right, the Bruce Boyer Memorial, where actually, it was just like a bad game, right? Frankly, people were like coming up to me afterwards, like congratulating me for the game, drawing a GM, and I was like why, right? Like it was a bad game, it was like defending the whole time, but like right, large majority, right? You're fighting, right? So you play like knight fd7. Truth of the matter is like, okay, I kind of don't see what the point of the move is per se, right? You're saying you're opening up your bishop, but okay, where's the bishop going? Right? The other idea that I'm looking at here is this rook and this queen are on the same file. Now, of course, for right now, that really doesn't mean much, but I'm not trying to put more pieces in between them. Right? So I think now you're kind of going a little bit into, passive mode. Right? So no, I think you need to, gain space. Right?
Yes.
So the idea is, right, once you get to, 1200, right, you're not hanging pieces anymore that much. Or at least it's more advanced blunders, that you're making. Right? And then though, like even up to my level, right? It's all a fight for squares, right? So c takes d4. Okay, you're gaining squares. Okay, has to take back with the knight. Okay, black is probably a little bit worse here. Computer probably is going to say like 0.8. Okay, not even 0.1. Normal position.
Wow.
Equal. Right. So
wow.
Right. So this is also an important idea, right? So I truly think there was a lot of psychology that was happening here.
You're absolutely right. I was going to say something, because I have played international masters, in tournaments, and I don't know. There's this intimidation factor. You start thinking like, there's no way in the world I'm going to beat this guy, and I think that was starting to set into my head, a little bit too. Plus, he was doing something that was super annoying. Every time he came around to make a move, he like really pounded the piece, on the board. And I think that was sort of a psychological thing too. Not that he had to do that against me. I mean, he's 1,000 points better, but some of these things kind of get in your head, and then you don't make the best moves. You start playing passive or whatever, very defensive. So I think some of that was in play here. But
excuse me, Jim, Evan and Jim, I was actually going to say something about this. Actually, if you listen to Hein Donner actually, has some tips about this, like former Grandmaster Hein Donner actually said that, look, if you want to be a GM at a Simon or just any Masters, always play for tactics. Don't play passively, because they have to play like 25 other people.
Yeah, and I think that
that are complicated. He might make a mistake because if you play.
Sam, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that once on your stream, you literally.
One thing that's important to consider is just to play for a win and don't be too afraid. I mean, I've lost both times, but I played Jay Bonin twice, and both times, one mistake I fall for is I get way too eager to sack my pieces because I'm like, gotta go crazy on Jay Bonin. I mean, that's a problem I have regardless, but that's not the topic. You gotta really just kind of pretend that you're not playing anyone better than you're normally playing and playing for the best moves, because either way you swing the pendulum, it's going to negatively affect the way you play.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you guys have said it, right? It's correct, right? A lot of it is like just reading, right? That's why, like, truly, right? No matter, look, you can be a kindergartner, it could be a grandmaster, it could be, whatever, right? 50 points, higher rated. Yeah, Peter Wheel actually just, I think came up with a good point. That's why they have this Zen mode on Lead Chess. I actually didn't even know what that meant until one of my instructors, Brian, was doing it a couple weeks ago. Right, but
what's Zen mode again? Explain.
Yeah, what is that?
Basically, it hides the ratings
There's
from
a
you.
mode where like you can, where like it won't show your opponent's names or their ratings.
Oh.
Yeah, so it makes it interesting. But anyway, so the whole idea, right? Is look. I'm not saying I even do this like 100% objectively, but I really do try in any position to make literally exactly the same move that I would against, Alex Golden or Michael Rode or Mark Paragua, who's the grandmaster on our team, that I would against kindergartner, literally a kid that's brand new to chess. Right, because it's funny sometimes. Actually, I'll make a move against a kindergartner that's an attacking move, or I'm attacking their queen. They're like, "You think I'm not going to see it?" They're not realizing that, like, no, like I'm actually expecting them to see it, right? Like it's a good move, right? I'm not doing it, because I don't think that they're going to save their queen, even though they might not, at that level, right? I'm doing it because it's a good move. So anyway, right? C takes D4. Objectively, is definitely the best move. One thing that is, I think, worth noting: Knight C6, Rook C1, Bishop D7. Right? Sample line. What do you think White would do here?
Knight D5.
Very nice. Knight D5, right? Very I'm not even 100% sure that it's the best move here, but let's see if the computer agrees. Well, okay, it actually doesn't like Knight D5 so much. Why? Oh,
because
okay, because
after it takes, you take on E4.
Yeah,
and
doesn't work there. Yeah. But okay, I'm just showing you a very thematic sacrifice. I actually highly recommend the book 7 ways to smash the Sicilian. I can't spell Sicilian, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
My two good friends, Yuri Lapshin and Nick Conticello, wrote the book together. Unfortunately, Nick passed away last year, but they wrote the book together, and it's a great book. What are the? Let's see, the 7 ways to break the Sicilian. Knight b5, knight d5, knight takes e6. If I had some time, maybe I could think about it. But anyway, there's 7 thematic types of sacrifices in the Sicilian.
On second thought, Evan, I admit knight d5 was wrong, but oh wait a minute, it's not gonna like. Oh yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to the game. So knight fd7. D takes c5. Queen
Now
takes.
he takes my
And you're not hiding the notification.
Oh yes. That's your one job, Sam. You have to remind me that. I'm kidding. Sort of. Not really. Okay. End all of your cameras. Okay, cool. Now I see your cameras. They went hidden. Right, so D takes C5, right? Actually a little bit of a surprise, for me. I would imagine he would not play D takes C5 and maybe just develop, but hey, that's what he did. And I guess okay, it forces your queen to, somewhat come out in the open a little bit.
Hide the notation.
Yes. Okay. Queen takes c5, queen d2, knight b6. Why knight b6? Right, so the thing is, I think knight b6 is a little bit too direct. Right, okay, it's a threat, but he defends against it. And your knight on b6, right, is kind of in the way of a potential b5 break.
right.
So I think here, sort of the logical move to me would be knight e5, right, to get to this critical square. Right,
Yes.
and of course you're not too worried about him doubling your pawns and activating your rook.
Right. Yeah, that.
Right, so knight e5, right, knight c6, right, and if you think about it logically too, right, there are 4 times you want to trade. When you're down, when you're up material, when your opponent is attacking, when your opponent has a worse pawn structure, and when you have less space, which you do now. So knight e5, right? Makes sense, right? Trying to go for some trades. Okay, so rook c1. Yeah, you correctly So in fact, yeah, I mean, I actually said b3, but yeah, Golden's move of rook c1 is much better. Right? Nice tactical idea. Of course, if takes, queen takes, knight d5, right? Pretty simple tactic.
Yeah, I saw that, so I didn't fall for that. But...
Right? Thematic idea.
Yeah.
So bishop d7, rook c1. Of course, now the same tactic still works. Okay, so here, right, is definitely a time where, okay, right, regardless of, who you're playing, you do not have, okay, the most, active position. But one thing that's really important, right, Sam, is, correct, saying d6 is a weakness. You need to go for counterplay at all costs. Right? Okay, right? You're like, okay, he's attacking my pawn. Okay, I'm going to defend it. Right? But the truth is, right, you're almost never going to hold your own against a titled player, or even just in general against a higher rated player by just defending. Right? It just doesn't work that way. Right? So I'd be thinking okay, bishop c6, something like this activity. Right, knight d7, knight e5. Right, you should probably at least go up to d5, for your bishop.
Evan, I don't think that's a good idea to play bishop d7 because for some reason I'm looking at the thing and like it looks like white has a big edge basically, and I feel like it's because the queen could be trapped that way.
How?
What?
How?
Yeah, that's. Yep.
I mean, let's just look at the engine just quickly. Because it looks like that it's not a good move for black.
So, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you said let's use the engine now, right? And the reason I say that, right, is part of this, lecture was also supposed to be about, analysis, right? And the engine is actually a really, really, really good tool if you use it the right way, right? Big if. So this actually is how Grandmaster Leonid Udasin really tried to get me to study and analyze my games. Okay, so a couple factors. One, and especially with Corona now, this is not something that, we really need to necessarily worry about, but you don't want to play too much. It sounds kind of crazy. I have the opposite problem with, a lot of students. But, back in high school, and I was working with Udasin, I was playing 2-3 tournaments a week, which was insane. I'd play almost every weekend at the Marshall, almost every Thursday night. Sometimes on Tuesdays, I'd play the New York Masters. And it got to a point where, like, I wasn't going over all my games, which was, like, terrible. So that's number one. Don't play too much. If you're gonna spend an hour, okay, learn some chess.
Yeah. Before you start a tournament, discuss it with your coach.
Yeah, which actually is an important idea. Peter is asking me, one tournament a week. I mean, look, it depends on the person. I obviously know you, pretty well. I teach you privately as well, and we go over all the games. So yeah, I that actually is okay. As long as you're like actually going over the games and you're, doing it correctly. Yeah, one tournament a week is not that much. Sam is saying every single game, going to a tournament, ask my coach to prepare openings. Right? Forget about all of your openings. Okay. I mean, okay, you can talk about that with, with your coach too on an individual basis. But the truth is, like, I've seen you play a lot. I think your openings relatively are very, very strong. But okay, that's, another subject, right? So the point about analysis, right? One, right, think about it from a perspective that, okay, you're giving enough time to it. Second thing that's really important is I, as much as possible, try to follow the specific order that Udasin taught me. Ideally, first, you should look at the game without any engine, any book, any coach, anything. Just yourself. And that analysis, ideally, you should do like the day of the tournament. Like, worst case, the next day. And your thoughts are really in your mind. Right? And you're going to obviously see a lot of mistakes on your own. Right? Or at least inferior things. Oh, simple thought process. Did I come up with this candidate move? Did I not? Oh, wait a minute. I didn't do a blunder check here. Or wait a minute. My opponent made some slightly inferior move in the opening and I didn't even notice. Right? I was just going with the flow. Right? Likewise, in this game, right, there was a moment where white played d4 and you played bishop b7 because you said, oh yeah, I want to play bishop b7 and castle. Right, but without really looking two ways and being like, oh wow, he's trying to play d4 and get a big center. I need to annul that first, and then okay, I could go continue playing bishop b7 and castle. Right, similar idea. So, right, so first, right, all on your own. Second, Peter Rooney, you're good at finding links. Look up an article by Mesken Amanov on US Chess about game analysis.
Mesken Amanov.
Yes, here I'll make it. Well, teamwork here. I'll write his name here.
Actually, chesslecture.com former lecturer Grandmaster Jesse Fry has said that there's two analysts with understanding carbon and the machine analysis. The carbon is since the carbon we use our brains and everything.
Right.
You know?
No, and it's a good point, right? You got to mix it up. Yeah. So that article is actually great. I know it well because that year in 2018, I was actually on the committee that gave him an award for the article.
What's the article? What website is the article on?
It's on US Chess. US Chess Online. Yeah, so there's every year there's journalism awards of the year, and Jen Shahadi actually asked me in 2018 to be a judge, so I was.
So Evan, so the article is called Best of US Chess 2018, number one. Message on Training Champion. Is that the article?
Okay, you got it first. Put it in the chat. All right, nice.
It's because using Chrome and I'm using Bing.
Yes. Yes. So yes, Meska Namanov, strong grandmaster in Chicago. Also good teacher. Sam, maybe you ran into him at one point. I don't know. Living in Chicago, but anyway. Point is, right? It was a very good article. Highly recommend it. But you know, he talks about that, right? So okay, number one, yes, you go over your games, you know, by yourself. Right? Then the next step is you look at them with an opening book. Okay, so you're not yet looking at the engine, right? You're just, you know, looking at the opening, okay, figuring out, you know, where you went away from your theory. Okay, next, look at the game with the computer. Next, look at the game with the coach, not with the computer. Right. Lastly, you should check with the computer. Right. I had one student, you know, last year that I was working with privately, and it was like literally like the most annoying thing. You know, I'd be at his home going over games. He's like, "Oh, but Stockfish said this. So Stockfish said this. Blah 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 blah." Right. And I'm like, "Do you know why Stockfish said this?" "Oh, I have no idea." "Oh, okay." Right. Right. Or, you know, nowadays, like online, you know, people are like, "Oh, you should put on the engine, blah blah blah." I'm like, well, if you're gonna do that, why are you hiring us? You know, to teach you. Right. But of course, you know, just looking at the engine, you won't see that much. Awesome. I've taught many of chess lessons at Starbucks. Oh, and actually, one thing that is actually kind of cool that you could take a look at is Decoder Chess. This is it's basically an Israeli chess startup. Actually, I've looked at it a little bit. People could let me know, you know, if it's good or not. But basically, they take computer analysis and variations and basically make the quantitative qualitative.
Are you saying decoder chess, or what do you call it? Is it?
Yeah, it's DECODER. I have a subscription to that too, and they're using artificial intelligence to try to like put in words, you know, make it more human-like, I guess, is the objective. You know, instead of just here's the computer line, it tries to put some words to different ideas.
So, you know, it's interesting. You know, in theory, it's good. You know, I've, you know, the CEO has written out to me many times. I've tested it, but not too much. So, just an idea. So anyway, right, going for complications important, right? So yes, right. Sometimes we do look at the engine to keep each other honest, right? So one thing that I will do, and you've seen me do this, already a little bit, right? I don't use the engine a lot during lessons, whether it be private, in person, whatever. But occasionally times, yes, I will absolutely keep myself honest, right? So like in this position, for instance, right, if we go one step back, okay, bishop e8, white is plus 3.2. Bishop c6, 3.4. Right, so guess what? Objectively, your move is slightly better than bishop c6. Now,
Actually, the only move for black at this point is knight c6.
right. So there's a couple factors to consider here. One, you don't want to do what my good friend Mark Esserman, International Master, likes to do, which is called cloud computing. At least his term for cloud computing. Which basically is just looking at one move being like, oh, that was 3.4, this one is 3.7, so that move is better, right? Without having, like, literally any idea. Okay? Second thing is, right, especially in a position like this where, honestly, black is substantially worse, right? Away from the computer evaluation, it's important to start actually thinking about, what? Like, the truth is, right, especially, against someone like Golden, right, a strong grandmaster, the truth is, the difference of plus 1.5 and plus 3, is nothing, right? 1.7 is winning, 3 is winning, right? So I much rather have minus 3 and, like, a lot of complications than minus 1.5 and make it just very, very simple for him. And my good friend Jakob Norowitz, International Master, if you look at our website and you look at our testimonials, you'll read how he hates to play against me. Right? Not because he's not weaker than me. Not because he's weaker than me. He's 2,500, I'm 2,200. But I don't just sit and wait for him to win like a lot of other even masters. I'm always, going for complications. Okay, so bishop e8, a3, right?
I think he should have played knight to d5 here instead of a3.
Computer agrees with you.
Yeah.
Knight d5, computer agrees with you. Right, kind of winning.
Because if he takes with the pawn, then you get his queen.
Right.
Yeah, c takes d5.
Right, but also, okay, a3, is also strong and objectively not as good. Right, but also, you need to think of the human element. Right, especially in a simul. Right, knight d5. Okay, you need to do like a lot of calculating to know that it's good. Right? I mean, okay, it actually is like fairly simple. But okay, right? There's more of a human element to consider. So okay, so a3, knight a4. Yeah, that makes sense. You want to trade b4, queen c8, queen c2, knight takes c3, queen takes c3, bishop f6.
Can you hide a notation?
Okay, so bishop f6, right? Not so sure about that, right? Because you're defending this critical pawn, right? So I would first develop, play knight c6, continue developing, and then figuring out how to activate the bishop. Yeah, so e5 takes, bishop f3. So yeah, I mean, you just certainly has a big positional advantage now, with the better bishop. Rook d6, queen e3, takes, d4, queen d2, and yeah, I mean you're definitely defending here, very well for a while. Knight g4, but unfortunately, white's just substantially worse because there's pawns on both sides of the board, so the bishop is a lot stronger, right? As a long range piece. So takes, and now he just starts.
That was a mistake right here. This was my mistake because I allowed him to fork my king and bishop and get my good bishop. Huge mistake right here.
Exactly. Right. So yeah, queen c3. It's probably, probably a little bit better for black, but I don't see this.
You mean white?
Yeah, a little bit better for white, but yeah, right. Computer's staying equal. Okay. Definitely easier to play for white. Yeah.
So what were you saying, Evan, was a good move, or what was the mistake Jim made in this position? Because
Knight f6 check.
That move right there, trading queen, forcing a trade of queens, huge mistake.
Right. So a couple ideas here, right, that are important to learn from. One, I would imagine you probably had the mindset that right, so he played queen d4, right? I imagine you likely had the mindset here that you were like just losing, basically. Right, or much worse. Right, because you were defending a long time. So I remember one very critical lesson that I learned back in 2005, playing, or I think it was 2008 rather, playing in the Marshall Championship in New York, and I was playing against a pretty strong grandmaster, Magesh Paganathan, and I was an expert at the time, like 2000, maybe 2100, and I was defending, defending pretty well, and I thought I was still defending. And I was going over the game afterwards with my friend Pascal Charbonneau, another strong grandmaster. He won the Canadian Championship a couple times. And, I remember, like, Pascal was like, why do you make this, like, relatively passive move? And he was like, well, like, I'm defending. He's like, why? And I was like, oh, well, I was like defending for a while, blah, blah, blah. Right? But truly, right, I needed to constantly reevaluate the position and realize that, okay, I was actually equal. Right? Truly, the only reason I thought I was still, like, worse and needing to defend was because I was playing a grandmaster. And I was defending before, and in my mind, I was still, the underdog. When truly, okay, it's a position like this that, is pretty equal. Right? So, yeah, queen f...
Would king of G6 work here? I'm looking at, the queen coming to H8.
Yeah, so king G6 is the best move.
I think it is, and I wasn't sure. Right, that would have held things together for me.
Right. This position is just equal.
Evan and Jim. Evan, I don't think Evan and Jim, I understand how you feel, but even though, yes, you should keep the bishop on the board, but, a trade of queen wouldn't be even that bad of a position, because first of all, after queen takes, queen takes f4, and if he does,
hold on.
You have to pass d-pawn.
Okay, thank you. Right, the idea, right? No, it actually does just lose, right? Because white loses.
You're in the square with the pawn.
Right.
What?
So stop. So I could explain. Right. So, no, it does just basically lose, right? Because now also, okay, the knight's going to be the better piece. These pawns are advanced. These pawns are doubled. Okay. Like, even if it doesn't completely lose, which, okay, it probably does. Okay, positionally, okay, it's not that good, right? So the idea is, right, like, I'm thinking, right, like knight f6 check, right, all these ideas. Okay, king g6, stop it. Right, so, like, and the truth of the matter is, right, like, this kind of game should actually, like, give players confidence. Like, Golden actually, like, threw away his advantage. You know, Golden, honestly, like, yeah, okay, he was also in the simul, you know, playing a bunch of people, but, you know, he, you know, kind of just played a little bit, you know, relaxing too much. Right? And okay, this would have been equal. Sorry, but we need to move forward because I want to try to finish the game real quick. Right, so King G7, and then yeah, right, as you guys said,
it's losing.
Right,
Yeah.
it's just losing. Right, so couple things to, you know, take away from that game. Right, one, right, a lot of it is psychology. Right, no matter who you're playing, right, 50 points higher rated. You know, that's it. Second thing, you know, English, right? Make sure that you're okay with the queen pawn openings, you know, that could come out of it. Right. The third thing, you know, make sure, right, you're constantly, you know, figuring out, you know, are you actually worse? You know, or is it just because, you know, it's a, you know, a better player, right? No, we're always going for, you know, counterattack. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll stick around for a minute or two if anyone has any questions or things that they would want. Peter, I'm sorry we didn't get to it. We will do that next week. Your game.
Yeah, excuse me, Evan. So yeah, now I see why trading queens were losing because I thought the pass D pawn would help black, but no, it can't do anything because you know, the king could easily get in front of it, and white has like the pass H pawn to distract the king.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. See you all next time. Yeah, Peter, we could either do it next week, or if you want, you could certainly ask Brian to go over it.
Are you streaming a simul soon, Evan?
Probably not today, but I'll be doing another one.
Yeah, but you don't let us get to, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I did.
Okay, bye, everyone.
But you hopped off the top?
No way. Yeah, because you're shooting at me, so I left.
Okay, we're gonna be rating now my good friend, Jacob Perchona.
Wow. Curtis going to score well against him as well. Nice job, Curtis scoring those wins. Hey, Premier Chess just came in again with the raid. Holy cow, let's give a shout out to